नमस्कार, जय हिंद, जय भारत and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. हमारे साथ है Rami ji, who's one of the biggest and I think one of my most trusted sources, experts, somebody I really bank on when I want to learn about Northeast, Bengal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and that entire region के बारे में अगर आपको पता करना है, she's the one, and she's been very great, with regards her explanations and her details that she's been giving us. So, Rami ji, thank you so much. I won't take much time, but I would really want to know, has America made a base in Myanmar or Bangladesh or no man's land or anywhere? बताइए, कुछ बनाया है उसने कि ऐसी है हवा में है?
Aadi, first, my friend, my dear friend, my favorite podcaster,
Thank you.
I have to apologize for being a bit tardy because I'm traveling and I'm a little bit short on sleep. So I hope you understand and your lovely, lovely audience understands if I'm a little bit all over the place. But yeah, I'm traveling right now. But obviously, I'm not going to miss your podcast
Oh my,
for
thank you
anything.
so much.
So if I look sleepy and if I act sleepy, it's because I am sleepy. So, okay,
Sorry.
America, in Myanmar, Bangladesh, around our country. I've said this before, Aadi. I think, I've written about this also. I've spoken about this also. And I've not just spoken about this or written about this now, I've done it before as well, like years ago. Bangladesh, we've discussed this multiple amounts of times that, you know, before the ouster of Sheikh Hasina itself, 2 years before that, it started coming as a surprise to us the interest of the Americans in Bangladesh, whether it was with their sanctions, whether it was their sanctions on the TPP, whether it was Ambassador Haas, So, um, also there was, remember the ambassador at that time, Ambassador Haas, the US ambassador, he was also making all these undue visits to the election commission. They were making the right noises, the Americans, the Australians, the European Union all together took out a resolution saying that, oh, we demand for fair and free elections in Bangladesh. So, we've discussed this that, we saw it coming. And there was no two ways about it. We knew that there would be a attempt at regime change. After that, of course, many things have happened. If you look at anybody who's studying Myanmar closely, will realize that there definitely is some amount of Western influence in Myanmar in terms of of course, when the Tatmadaw took over, the Tatmadaw is the armed forces. Um, when they took over and there was a regime change in Myanmar, wherein the NLD was ousted, Aung San Suu Kyi's party was ousted, and the Tatmadaw took over. The Americans suddenly got really, really interested. And it's not just about the Americans, it's about the West, it's about even people like Soros, these groups that we know have caused trouble within India as well. Um, Became people who sort of started getting involved in Myanmar. The Americans, if you look at the Americans, you'll see that in Myanmar, there was the Burma Act 2020, which was a certain amount of money that was sanctioned under Biden's regime to fund the resistance. Of course, it was under the guise of humanitarian aid. Um, if you ask the resistance that have met the resistance, they'll say we didn't get any of that money. If you ask some, they'll say yes, we did get it and we used it for humanitarian aid. And if you ask others, they'll say it wasn't just used for humanitarian aid. It was used for some level of intervention as well. That is one side of it. They also had the TTP program, which was program, temporary protection program, TPP
Hmm.
program, which was the refugees that had been affected by the conflict in Myanmar would get some sort of a speeded visa process and temporary stay in the United States. Of course, that was halted the minute uh, Trump came in. And people who had even got their visas and were just waiting for their passports to come back now were stuck. So that TPP program is now stuck. Burma Act, the money that was being sanctioned also is suspended. As you know, US aid is also suspended. However, 200, 250, $300 million, really, like Aadi, you know, that's really not much any longer anyway. That's pocket change. So, of course, there's bigger money involved and bigger interests involved. There's also been a lot of news of mercenaries, Western mercenaries being on the ground in Myanmar. Um, how do you know that? That there are
They have
videos of them,
photographs. Yeah.
there are photographs, there are videos. Of course, you know, photographs is something it's difficult to really identify the location. But with videos, you can to a certain extent. So there are videos, there are people who are claiming on the ground that they're there and are very happy that they're there because it's some sort of sense of support for the resistance. Um, there is also experts who have identified the fact that the way the resistance, or you call them ethnic armed organizations, or you call them militia, whatever you want to call them, the way they are wearing their safety jackets, holding their weapons, definitely is Western training. Third, so you have the angle of overboard money that is coming in and programs that they are funding. Number two, you have the angle of the mercenaries. And number three, you have the angle of the fact that uh, there is geopolitical contestations in this region. You see China, we spoke about this last time, that China has great interest in Myanmar because it's influencing not even the ethnic armed organizations, but also the Tatmadaw altogether. It has a footprint in Myanmar. This obviously would have the antennas of uh, Western powers up and sharpened. And therefore, it would only make sense for them to try to, you know, get some space in Myanmar as well. Also, historically, the West has never really gotten along with the Tatmadaw. So they're not really very happy that the Tatmadaw will go into elections, which they have promised. And what will really happen is that Tatmadaw backed political party will come into power because the ethnic armed organizations and their political parties are boycotting the elections. So if the Tatmadaw doesn't like the West and the West doesn't like the Tatmadaw, then that's like a losing case
Hmm.
for the Americans. Also, then the other angle is the fact that India is also right at the forefront. If China has gained in Myanmar, it's not as if India is far behind. Yes, we may not have the same strategies, we may not have the same tactics, we may not move the same way as China. Yes, um, we may have uh, sort of started off a little late in the whole game. But does that mean that we don't have a footprint there? Does that mean that we don't have friends on the ground? That we don't have influence? That we cannot, when the earthquake happened in Myanmar, you know, I was there at that point. The first responders on the ground were Indians. And when I mean first responders, was not just aid that we were sending aid, we were sending up people there. It's gotten us so much of goodwill that it's incredible. So, you know, we also have space. Then, you know, India's ambition has always been towards Southeast Asia. And I think in the future also that's a really, really good plan. As far as I see it, West Asia, the West even, in the next 50 years, has a very unstable future. It is Southeast Asia that is going to grow economically. It is going to be a point of interest for India to make further deepen, you know, our connections with. Therefore, Myanmar as a land route is important. Of course, we have maritime routes. Let's not get so disappointed in this, saying that, oh, you know, Myanmar is in a state of flux. We have maritime routes also, but of course, you know, it would be great to have land routes. The West would be interested then in Myanmar to not just counter China, but then to also counter India. And why would we feel that they're not interested in countering India? That's the whole game in the world, is of this geostrategic influence, of trying to remain a unipolar world, trying to prevent a multipolar world from emerging, trying to remain a superpower, trying to contain other superpowers. That is the new world order that is trying to, emerge, has emerged, and therefore is meeting resistance. Now, because your question is so open ended, because you're talking about Myanmar and Bangladesh, Adi, please allow me a couple of minutes to then now come to Bangladesh. We spoke about the sorry, continue.
Could you please also add the Russian angle, because the Russians have recently secured a base in Myanmar as well.
See, they have the Dawei port. The Russians have also delivered military equipment to the Tatmadaw. The Russians are there. However, with the Russians, even though relationships are great, the Tatmadaw has built strong relations with Russia. But remember, everything plays multiple ways. I was in uh, I was in Naypyidaw when they launched the Myanmar narrative. The Myanmar narrative is the official think tank for the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, uh, for the Tatmadaw, for the government. And Senior General Ling, who is the leader right now, gave a very interesting speech, which must be analyzed on multiple different levels. And he spoke very much how India would speak about its foreign policy, that our national interests come first. We are not uni-aligned, so as to say, we are multi-aligned. We will engage where our interests are served. Myanmar has a lot of potential, therefore we cannot jeopardize it by siding with anybody. Spoke about minilaterals. So think of it in this way. Don't just think of Tatmadaw being interested in having Chinese influence and having Russian influence and trying to make a bloc. No, think of them trying to have Russian influence to counter China also. So everybody is playing a balancing act, and so is the Tatmadaw. So while Russia has got the Dawei port, has military relations, has had General Ling, has met Putin, so on and so forth. Um, there's also a little bit of hesitancy on the ground that Russia commits to projects but takes far too long uh, to really, bring it to any sort of fruition. So there is a certain amount of doubt there as well. Not on Russia, but the fact that, you know, if they've got projects, are they going to actually start it off, let alone complete it? So that is the Russia angle. You come to the American angle now, again, and you come to the recent humanitarian corridor proposal in Bangladesh. The humanitarian corridor cannot just be seen as something that the Americans wanted in Bangladesh. The humanitarian corridor is something that would serve for them to have an entry in Bangladesh and in Myanmar. The corridor takes you from Bangladesh to Myanmar, right? It is to facilitate, in their words, a humanitarian aid to a conflict-ridden country from Bangladesh. Uh, it is for them to open this dialogue about repatriation of the Rohingyas. And again, this is something that we discussed last time. What do you mean by repatriation of the Rohingyas? Do the Rohingyas want to go back? The Rohingyas don't want to go back. Do they think that they'll be safe if they go back? No, they don't think they'll be safe if they go back. Do the Myanmaris want them? No, they don't want them. Um, are the Rohingyas willing to shed the Rohingya identity? No, they are not. The reason I say this is because I met Arakan Army, and Arakan Army said that we don't mind having Muslims from Arakan Muslims, but the Rohingya identity is problematic to us. So, if that is the case, I think it's going to be problematic because the Rohingya Muslims see the idea of being Rohingyas primary to who they are. ARSA also is the full form of ARSA is Arakan Rohingya uh, Salvation
Salvation.
Army. So Rohingya is very central to that. And remember this, that they're a highly radicalized group of people. Their leadership is Pakistani. Jununi is born in Pakistan, educated in Saudi. They have been used time and again. Um, they've been weaponized. They've been used against not just India, but used for various other activities. Even in Myanmar, even in Bangladesh, the biggest drug traffickers were the Rohingyas. If you go to Cox's Bazar, it's a ghetto.
Hmm.
Syndicates run there, mafias run there. They are involved in everything illegal. So, where have the Americans got this idea that anybody wants them back or anybody wants them anywhere? I feel if they're so concerned, they should take them. But obviously, this was something that Yunus had suggested that, oh, there should be stakeholding of Western countries, wherein the Rohingyas, the responsibility of theirs is not just ours, but it's theirs also. Suddenly that went out of the window. He's never brought it up again because nobody's going to take them. So why is there this guise of the humanitarian corridor? Also, last time we pointed out the fact that the NSA, who had suddenly been elevated when the army chief was out of town, comes from a diplomatic background, comes from the United Nations, is very well versed. The NSA was there again in the West, so he's very well versed with uh, the Western world and institutions, and it makes that um, it makes the interests that he brings with him questionable. And therefore, I think one has to be wary about those movements and follow those movements very closely. But also, um, you would have noticed that the West has taken a step back from the humanitarian corridor. Suddenly, this whole interest in providing humanitarian aid and this and that, why has it taken a back seat? Because there was so much of hue and cry that you are not sending humanitarian aid to Myanmar. You are going to use it as a militarized corridor. There were also USAF 2 planes, reports of 2 USAF planes that had come from the air base, American air base, which was recently bombed as well. There was news of DIA operatives on ground or overseeing the transfer of cargo. Suddenly, everything became quiet because there was a big hue and cry. Because I think there was enough noise that was made, um, where people said that, oh, you've already done this. Bangladesh is in a mess. There is no sight of elections, even though they've said that elections will happen. It's still in a mess. Yunus seems unlikely to want to let go of power. Radicalization, there is a certain level of peaking in radicalization. Political parties are getting nervous. You've made a mess of Bangladesh, and now you want this humanitarian corridor in Myanmar, to Myanmar. For what reason? See, one of the reasons is also because it would take them right into the Arakan area, where Arakan Army is. And Arakan Army at this point is the most formidable ethnic armed organization in Myanmar. So Americans, if they could split NSCN, which was ideologically very rooted, a very sophisticated insurgent group, if they could split it into two, I really do believe that they could split Arakan into two. And like I said, this is a discussion that I have had with certain people from Arakan, and I have had it um, on their base, and it's something that they have not outright rejected. That this could be this could be the design behind this idea. Also, remember, right next to Arakan is the Chin state, which is a Christian state. So it would make it very fruitful for them to have this larger base, bringing us back again to what the ousted Bangladesh premier had said, Sheikh Hasina had said about Americans wanting a Christian state. So all of these things put together, tell you about their involvement on ground. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, who made the hue and cry?
No, it was made. It was made across. I don't know what happened in the back channels, but it was in news reports. The Bangladeshi news. The Bangladeshi military wasn't happy. Arakan wasn't happy. There were podcasters like you. There were
I'm saying
analysts.
India wasn't happy, of course. So I want to
See,
know.
India wasn't happy. Bangladesh military wasn't happy. Myanmar wasn't happy. And Myanmar, the Arakan wasn't happy. The Tatmadaw wasn't happy. News reports were going against them. Public opinion was going against them. So all of it coming together makes a difference. And I'm sure there must have been back channel talks from India. There must have been back channel talks from other countries saying, look, you're really going to get a backlash. And I think what the US really needs to understand is that you have a dispensation today that an average Indian welcomed. And now with what has happened with Operation Sindoor, what has happened with this humanitarian corridor, you have lost a lot of faith from the same people who supported you. And Indians supporting you is very, very important. Our sheer population makes us a formidable voice. Our diaspora within the United States makes us a formidable voice. Now, you can argue and say, oh, it doesn't matter to them. Sure, it doesn't matter to them maybe on a tactical level. Does it matter to them on a perceptual level? Yes, it does.
That I agree with, because I've been kind of seeing one thing when Trump did actually say, "Oh, I'll leave Bangladesh to be handled by Mr. Modi," and then 1 month later we saw this happening. That gave me a hint that okay, this guy doesn't seem to be fully in control of his this thing. And I was
See,
waiting for some sort of a back channel so that some pushback happens from there. And obviously, nothing came in the public domain, but I knew something was happening. And now you're kind of confirming
see,
what
and
I've.
what happens is the governments can change. The deep state doesn't change. The deep state doesn't change with the government. So um, there are designs, there have been designs, and that continues. And I think these are areas that are very complex for the West to understand. They don't understand the politics, they don't understand ethnic organizations, they don't understand the ethnic mindset, they don't understand the ethnic religious leanings, fault lines, the synergies. Um Also, for some reason, the West has always thought that tribal cultures, tribal communities, communities in remote areas, um, societies with strong ethnic moorings somehow don't have intelligence, that they cannot make decisions on their own, that they're not politically sophisticated. And I think that is changing for them. Maybe they could manipulate uh, certain communities and ethnic groups not being very internationally well entrenched 100 years ago. That is not the same today, because now the leaderships of ethnic organizations, armed organizations, are men of the world. They are educated, they are professionals, they have vast networks. So it's high time that the West recalibrates what
Look
it
at the
thinks,
Taliban.
yeah, what it thinks about the other side of the world. Also, the West always thinks that it can raise radical Islam and then it can control it. It has never been able to control it. And once a country is radicalized, there is not one country that I know that radicalization has been reversed in. So, therefore, this is a very dangerous terrain, not only for them to be encouraging, but for us to have in our backyard. So, we have to be really, really careful and watchful of it.
I keep kind of pondering this itself, that the backlash is not, yeah, fair enough, we'll deal with the backlash, we've been living in this nonsense, we'll be able to figure it out, that's not a problem. And I think with the new policy, I don't think there's going to be much ambiguity and time taken in terms of the decision to hit back when it's needed. but the Americans will not be able to figure it out. Now, tell me one thing. One of the biggest reasons the Americans wanted to interfere in this region is to kind of push back China. That was aim number one. After that, of course, trouble India and this and that and check us and all that. Great. And when I look at the map of American deployment, I see two gaps. In terms of their military bases or lily pads or whatever you may want to call it. And there's that famous map that goes around. There's a gap in the Arabian Sea where we know he's trying to either budge into Pakistan, Iran, somewhere. And then there's a gap in the Bay of Bengal, which we know there's going to be the hub center of maritime activity going forward for the Indo-Pacific, as per se. So, do you think America basically leaves its plans to have a base in the Bay of Bengal and sits quietly within, the beyond the Malacca and of course Diego Garcia?
See, the Bay of Bengal has always been of interest to them. It will continue being point of interest to them. They will continue to try to gain some foothold in this region for many reasons. Of course, there's the geopolitical contestations that we spoke about. There is, the strategic contestations. China's there, Russia's around the corner, India is there. These little islands where there's Saint Martin's, Paris, Coco, Andamans, all of this, has very significant positioning. So obviously they'll want a foothold there. But also let me bring your attention to the fact that they have great interest in critical earth mining, and if you look at what happened during the tariff war, the China said we're not going to supply them critical earth because 90% of the critical earth, processed critical earth, comes from China. So they said we're not going to supply it. Suddenly they made a move for Pakistan for mining there. And now the foreign ministers meeting in Quad has also signed an agreement on critical earth mineral. So this is again an area that has multiple layers and multiple interests. It's not just about China, it's not just about India. It is about China, it is about India, it is about Russia, but it's also about a lot of other things.
It's and this is the last segment. I want to ask you a couple of questions. When we look at the situation, it's very interesting. Why? Because China is the main guy he would want to block. And funnily speaking, currently they're allowing China to buy oil from Iran. That's, I don't know, very interesting. Either he's trying to get him dependent and then swoop down and finish it when he can, because they just sanctioned Iran 57 different sanctions today. So we know America wants to kind of trample on Chinese oil coming out, oil and gas from, Myanmar, that CMEC and this and that. What happens to all that? Is that just left to this thing and America basically feeds in money, feeds in whatever resources it can to the Arakan to kind of strengthen it up? Why am I saying this? Because since the past about 2 weeks, I've seen the Arakan on a certain offensive. There are reports of heavy fighting, and there are reports of pushbacks from the Arakan side going on a certain kind of an offensive. Shoot downs of Chinese aircraft there, Chinese Myanmarese aircraft, all that stuff is also happening. But what's happening here? How has the Arakan suddenly got so much strength?
You see, the Arakan's always been strong. The reason they've been strong is that they've been able
And of
to
course, the food. Sorry, my apologies. And the food. Where are they getting the food from? Because
see
we know there was a problem there.
see Arakan, even though it is a new ethnic armed organization, which really gained a lot of traction during Aung San Suu Kyi's time. And again, it has really smart, educated, you know, people with very large, wide contacts networks around the world. One of the things that Arakan's been able to do is supply not just manpower, but also strategy training and tactics to other organizations across Myanmar. Whether it's in the northern regions or in other regions, they have alliances with many, many other ethnic armed organizations, and therefore that is a chain of revenue for them. The other chain of revenue, of course, for them is some of the routes where where you have illegal items that cross through, where there is revenue sharing with other ethnic armed organizations as well. So that's another second, chain of revenue systems for them. The third is also the fact that they have cut a deal with the Chinese. See, the Tatmadaw may use Chinese planes. So when they're shooting them down, they're not shooting down the Chinese. They're shooting down you know, they're shooting down uh, the Tatmadaw, the Air Force. So they have Chinese boots on the ground protecting the Chokpu port, which is the Chinese-owned port. The Indian-owned port is Sitwe. The Chinese-owned port is Chokpu, but it also has an oil uh, and gas pipeline, which also needs protection. So another way of great revenue generation is to allow countries to protect their own assets on their soil and to take protection money from them. So that is another chain of revenue generation for them. So there are multiple streams of revenue generation. So there's no dearth of money. Um, there is then also, you've asked the question of food. See, food is problematic, but because there are, you have to understand the Myanmaris can sustain on very little. Their eating habits can be very vegetarian as well in terms of local crops, local trees, local leaves. They make delicious food out of it. So for them to really sustain themselves is not difficult. But I do, however, foresee a problem cropping up, which is though farming has been enough for them and simple, they can just eat simple rice also. That's the kind of food that they're used to. That has been enough for them. There is finally going to be a problem of seeds. Where do they procure seeds from? Anyhow, I don't think that's going to be a big problem. I think they will be able to solve that problem. They are sophisticated enough to do so. But the other
Yes,
problem is
regional
there's
partners, yeah, India, Thailand, so many people who will say, yeah, le jao yaar, karo jo karna hai aapko.
regional partners होगा, humanitarian होगा,
Yeah. वो हो
but
जाएगा, shouldn't be a problem.
also there is an exodus of a lot of people, who've left a lot of these regions. So it's not as if the population is great. So it's not a huge population that you need to feed. However, the earthquake, which actually largely impacted Mandalay and Sagaing region, um, that caused sadly more damage, more suffering than need be. Already they were suffering under the kind of conflict that was going on, and then with the earthquake, the suffering was even more. So I think some of those regions might be a little more affected, but I think A will continue. A is a smart organization. They have their channels of negotiations open. I think they will negotiate with the Tatmadaw if they can come to some sort of uh, mutually beneficial strategy, and they are not a part of the NUG, the National Unity Government that many ethnic armed organizations are part of. So therefore, they don't have to follow any larger mandate. They're free to do what they want to, So they're also working in a very uh, state a multi-alignment sort of strategy is what they are following as well.
Last question. What's happening within us? There is a certain change where cookies are now saying NRC karao, NRC karao, NRC karao. There was a bit of a violence. Thoda sa, some spat happened, which I kind of see, okay, hoga. Ye sab aage jaake bhi hoga. Things are relatively a little more peaceful. Some refugee camps, I'm not confirmed, have been emptied, and a lot of Myanmaris have been sent back in small numbers. That's what people say. Some relief camps that were there for the Manipuri people, have they been emptied or not? No, not able to get that information. But we do know Mizoram has started pushing back. Fencing work, people are saying it's picked up pace. Today also there was a report. What's happening within us? Are we more stable, or is the doomsday scenario put out by a few people? We've lost half Manipur and all that. How does that sound?
Nonsense. I don't know who's saying this, why they're saying this. Look, I was last month on the border. And from the border, I crossed into Chin State, and I crossed into these areas as well. Um, I have a bird's eye view on what is happening because I met the refugees. I went to the refugee camps. I met the Chins. Um, I went into CNA controlled areas. I went into CNF controlled areas, so on and so forth. Um, the problem with the refugee camps is we know how many they are, we know where they are, and it's not as if they're just like sort of settling wherever they want to. Because even when they come from Myanmar into, let's say, Mizoram, it's not as if the Mizos are allowing them to just come and infiltrate. There are set areas where they have been asked to settle. In one of the areas, Pakwan, where I went, they were outside of the village. Now, Pakwan is literally on the border. It's only divided by a very tiny river uh, in to Myanmar. So they were asked to settle by the local villagers on the outskirts with the condition that they're not allowed trade. So they're allowed to be there for safety, but not for trade. Sure, there are some, some refugees would come earlier who have been registered in schools and all. But remember, to be able to get any benefits or to, give them temporary education, the state also needs to ask the center for more money, because there's the Pradhan Mantri, what is it called? It's the Shiksha Yojana and things like that, under which, little children get, one meal a day of food or whatever it is. Um, the state needs to be able to fund that. So it's not as if they're saying, oh, let everybody come in and so on and so forth. No, it's not like that. The thing about, again, fencing is, like I've always said, it's not going to be physical fencing. Yes, we will have to have some amount of biometrics. That biometrics is happening. Sometimes the problem of the biometrics is, and this is again on ground information that I'm giving you, is that the kind of people that are coming in are largely farmers. Their fingerprints have been wiped off because of the rough work that they do. It is very difficult to take their biometrics. So of course they can do the retina scans, this, that, and that is happening, and that will continue to happen. And I don't think in any way, all the Myanmaris are problematic and so on and so forth. No, there are obviously groups that are working from Myanmar. There are certain Myanmarese groups that are weaponized, and therefore, there are synergies. They're involved in poppy cultivation. There are groups like that, and that has posed a problem to us. Like we saw in Manipur. But all I'm saying here is that don't look at it in a blanket way. There are positions where there are problems. There are positions where there are deeper problems. But there are positions sometimes, where it becomes, uncontrollable, like it became in uh, Manipur, where there was a demographic change. So Manipur is a different situation, and it was over a period of time. It wasn't suddenly just the conflict started and it came. Like if you look at Mizoram, a lot of the people there and the registered refugees there are the people who have come after the conflict has started. Whereas in um, Manipur, it has been over a period of time that they've been coming in, and therefore it has been claimed that there has been demographic change. The day I landed in Myanmar, I had done a show. I was on a debate, Kartike's debate, where I had said that there would be interethnic conflict within the cookies as well. And we have seen that happen because what we've said right from the beginning, that it's not an umbrella group. There are dubious people, there are notorious people, there are politically motivated people who are trying to sell this narrative that it's an umbrella group and everybody's upset and everybody wants autonomous districts, or wants some amount of separation, territorial separation. No, there are fault lines within uh, groups and subgroups as well. And those fault lines now we are being able to see with the kind of conflict that's happening, because some groups are frankly getting sick and tired of this political narrative that certain people are running for their own benefit and for the money that they have made through this conflict. There are groups, there are subgroups who said, we don't want to be involved anymore. We want a ceasefire. We want to come to a negotiating table. But they know the leadership that, some of the political uh, or local leadership that is wanting to keep this idea that we can't live together and territorially we have to separate. Nobody's going to separate them territorially. They have to give up that idea, and I think if they don't, the fault lines within their own community will increase. So I think these are things that they need to think about. But technically my stance has always been on refugees is that, sure, India has always been a home to people who have suffered, but it is not an unconditional home. There are conditions, there are rules, there are regulations. You follow the rule of the land and you go back. And therefore, registry, NRC, biometrics, whatever sort of, a multimodal type of fencing, whatever needs to be done, needs to be done.
I think that is a very balanced approach, Rami. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Let me say this, an honor talking to you here. Apart from friends, it's I learn quite a bit, and it's important to speak to people like you to decipher the media madness. And guys, why am I saying that? Because trust me, I'm going to say something that I keep bugging her कि यार तुम क्या करते हो, friend का phone तो उठा लो. But the poor girl is literally on the ground there, and the information that she's telling you is first hand seen. And kudos, thank you so much for what you do, and hope to see you back soon and not after that long. So
Adi,
namaskar.
I'll be back on the ground tomorrow, and I'll be there for some time. And once I come back, I promise I'll come back with more information, and hopefully the gaps that we have in our understanding that you and me discuss, I will be able to fill it once I'm back.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
thank you for having me on. And yes, the poor girl needs some sleep.
Absolutely. To the audience, show your love, write your comments. Thank you so much. Namaskar.